Captain Sarah Chen had seen many strange things during her 15 years exploring the outer rim of human space, but nothing quite like the massive alien structure floating dead in the void. The USS Prometheus, her exploration vessel, had detected the enormous construct 3 days ago while investigating unusual energy readings in the Kepler 442 system. "Ma'am, we're getting close enough for detailed scans," reported Lieutenant Torres from his station. The young navigation officer's voice carried a mixture of excitement and nervousness that Sarah understood completely. First contact protocols were clear, but actually encountering alien technology was something else entirely. Sarah studied the massive structure on the main screen. It stretched for kilometers in every direction, a complex lattice of crystalline towers and metallic frameworks that seemed to pulse with faint blue energy. No signs of active weapon systems, no apparent defensive measures, just an ancient-looking station that radiated power even while appearing completely abandoned. "Any response to our hails?" Sarah asked her communications officer. "Nothing, Captain. We've tried standard first contact protocols, mathematical sequences, even music. Whatever built this thing, they're either not home or not interested in talking." Dr. Marcus Webb, the ship's xenoarchaeologist, couldn't contain his excitement. "Captain, the energy signatures we're detecting suggest this station is at least 10,000 years old, possibly much older. The construction materials alone represent technology far beyond anything we've encountered." "We have to investigate." Sarah considered their options carefully. The Prometheus was a research vessel designed for exactly this kind of discovery, but they were also 3 months away from the nearest human settlement. If something went wrong, help would be a long time coming. "Doctor, what are the risks of approaching closer?" Webb consulted his instruments. "The energy readings are stable, no signs of active defensive systems. Whatever this station was built for, it appears to be in some kind of maintenance mode. I recommend we dock with one of the smaller external ports and conduct a limited exploration." The decision wasn't easy, but Sarah knew that humanity's expansion into the galaxy depended on exactly these kinds of discoveries. "Very well. Take us in slowly, full sensors active. At the first sign of trouble, we retreat immediately." As the Prometheus approached the alien station, more details became visible. The construction was impossibly elegant, with flowing lines that seemed to follow mathematical principles human science was only beginning to understand. Docking ports were clearly marked with symbols that, while alien, conveyed their purpose through universal geometric principles. The docking procedure went smoothly, almost as if the station was designed to accommodate various types of spacecraft. Once secure, Sarah selected a small exploration team consisting of herself, Dr. Webb, Chief Engineer Rodriguez, and 2 security officers. The airlock cycled, and they stepped into an atmosphere that their instruments confirmed was breathable, though they kept their environmental suits sealed as a precaution. The interior of the station was as magnificent as the exterior suggested, with corridors that seemed to stretch infinitely in all directions, illuminated by the same soft blue energy they had observed from outside. "Captain, look at this," Dr. Webb called from a wall covered in symbols and what appeared to be some kind of data display. "These markings, they're not just decorative, they're telling a story." As Webb worked to decipher the alien writing, Chief Rodriguez was examining the technology around them. "This power system is incredible, Captain. Whatever they're using for energy, it's been running consistently for millennia without any apparent maintenance." They moved deeper into the station, mapping as they went. The place was vast beyond imagination, with sections that seemed dedicated to different purposes. Some areas contained what looked like living quarters designed for beings much larger than humans. Others held machinery whose purpose they could only guess at. It was in what appeared to be a central control room that they made the first real discovery. Dr. Webb had been working on the alien symbols for hours when suddenly a holographic display activated. showing what looked like a three-dimensional star map. "I think I've triggered some kind of historical record," Webb said excitedly. "These symbols, they're describing the builders of this station. They call themselves the Keepers, and according to this, they were responsible for maintaining order in this region of the galaxy for over 50,000 years. The hologram shifted, showing images of various alien species. Some were vaguely humanoid, others were completely unlike anything in human experience. But what struck Sarah was that all of them appeared to be living peacefully together under the protection of these keepers. "It's like they were some kind of galactic police force," Rodriguez observed. "But where did they go?" Webb continued his translation work, and gradually a disturbing picture emerged. The keepers hadn't disappeared voluntarily. They had been systematically eliminated by a coalition of species that had grown tired of their protection and oversight. The very beings they had protected for millennia had turned against them. "Captain, you need to see this." Webb's voice had lost all its earlier excitement. According to these records, the Keepers established what they called the Prime Directive, the fundamental rule that governed all their actions. The hologram displayed the text in the alien script, but Webb had learned enough to translate the key phrase: "Protect the innocent, preserve life, never harm those who cannot defend themselves." "It's beautiful," Sarah whispered. "They were protectors, not conquerors." But Webb's expression was growing more troubled as he read further. "Captain, there's more. The records indicate that the coalition that destroyed the Keepers consisted of 12 different species. They called themselves the Dominion, and their goal was to remove all restrictions on their expansion and exploitation of weaker civilizations. The implications were staggering. If the Keepers had been eliminated 50,000 years ago, what had happened to all the species they had been protecting? And more importantly, was this Dominion still active? Rodriguez was studying the technical readouts when he made another disturbing discovery. "Captain, I'm detecting massive weapons arrays throughout this station. They're powered down, but the energy signatures suggest they could level entire planets." "Defensive systems?" Sarah asked hopefully. "I don't think so, ma'am. These weapons are designed for precision strikes against specific targets. According to the power readings, they could eliminate threats across multiple star systems simultaneously." Dr. Webb had found more historical records, and his translation was revealing the final chapter of the Keeper's story. They knew the end was coming. The Dominion had convinced enough species to join their cause that the Keepers were vastly outnumbered. But instead of using their superior technology to fight back, they chose to shut down all their systems and go into exile. "Why would they do that?" Sarah asked. "Because fighting back would have meant harming the very beings they had sworn to protect. Even though those beings were trying to destroy them, the Keepers couldn't bring themselves to break their prime directive. The tragedy of it struck them all. An entire civilization had chosen extinction rather than compromise their principles." But as Webb continued reading, they discovered that the Keepers had made one final preparation before their exile. "They left instructions," Webb said, his voice filled with awe. "Detailed procedures for reactivating their systems, but only under specific conditions. The station will only respond to a species that demonstrates the same commitment to protection and preservation that the Keepers valued." Sarah felt a chill run down her spine. "What kind of demonstration?" Webb was still translating when alarms began sounding throughout the station. The blue energy that had provided gentle illumination suddenly shifted to harsh red, and displays around the control room began showing tactical information. "Captain, we're detecting incoming ships." Torres's voice crackled through their comm system from the Prometheus. "Multiple vessels, unknown configuration, approaching fast." Sarah rushed to a viewing port and saw them herself. Sleek, predatory-looking ships that moved with purpose and coordination. 12 of them, which couldn't be a coincidence given what they had just learned about the Dominion. "Captain," Dr. Webb called urgently. "The station's systems are fully active now. It's scanning the approaching ships. And according to these displays, they're identified as Dominion vessels. The station considers them hostile. Rodriguez was studying his instruments with growing alarm. "Ma'am, the station's weapons are powering up. Energy levels are climbing rapidly." Sarah realized they were about to witness the awakening of technology that had been dormant for 50,000 years, activated by the approach of the very enemies the keepers had died to avoid fighting. But now there were humans aboard the station, and she had no idea how the ancient systems would respond to their presence. "Captain," Webb said, his voice barely above a whisper. "According to the Keeper records, the approaching ships belong to the same species that led the coalition against them. They're called the Vorthak, and they've been hunting for remaining Keeper technology for millennia." The tactical displays showed the Dominion ships spreading out into attack formation. Whatever their intentions, they weren't coming in peace. Sarah watched as the station's ancient weapon systems completed their power-up cycle and waited for targeting commands. She realized that humanity had just stumbled into the middle of a 50,000-year-old war, and the decisions made in the next few minutes would determine not just their survival, but possibly the fate of countless innocent species throughout the galaxy. The Keeper's station hung in space like a sleeping giant, waiting for someone to decide whether their prime directive would finally be broken or whether it would be honored by a species that had never heard of it until today. The first shots from the Dominion vessels lit up the darkness, and Sarah knew their choice had been made for them. The energy beams from the Dominion ships struck the ancient station with devastating force, but Sarah was amazed to see the attacks simply dispersed against some kind of energy barrier. The protective shields that surrounded the Keeper station were technology beyond anything humanity had imagined, absorbing weapons fire that would have vaporized the Prometheus instantly. "Captain, the station's defensive systems are holding, but I'm reading massive power fluctuations," Rodriguez reported from his position at the technical console. "These shields haven't been tested in 50,000 years. I don't know how long they'll last against sustained fire." Dr. Webb was frantically working at the Keeper interface, symbols flowing across the displays as he tried to understand the station's systems. "Sarah, the station is trying to communicate with us. It's asking for authorization to activate its offensive capabilities." Through the viewing port, Sarah could see more Dominion ships emerging from hyperspace. What had started as 12 vessels was rapidly becoming a fleet. The sleek, predatory ships moved with deadly precision, their formation suggesting thousands of years of military experience. "How many are there now?" Sarah asked. 47 ships and counting," came Torres's voice from the Prometheus. "Captain, our sensors are also detecting something else. There are other ships in the area, staying at extreme range. They don't match Dominion profiles." Sarah turned back to Webb. "Doctor, can you access more information about these other species the Keepers protected? Are any of them still active?" Webb's fingers flew across the alien interface, and new displays activated around them. According to the records, there were hundreds of species under Keeper protection. Most were eliminated by the Dominion after the Keeper's exile, but some managed to escape to the Outer Rim territories. The station shuddered as the Dominion intensified their attack. Whatever energy source powered the ancient shields was immense, but Sarah could see stress patterns forming in the protective barrier. They didn't have unlimited time. "Captain," Rodriguez called out urgently, "the station's weapon systems are fully charged. I'm seeing power readings that suggest these weapons could destroy every ship in that fleet with a single volley." Sarah felt the weight of decision pressing down on her. The Keepers had died rather than use their weapons against those they had sworn to protect, even when those very beings were trying to destroy them. But now the situation was different. These were humanity's first steps into a larger galactic community, and the choices they made would echo for generations. Dr. Webb suddenly straightened from his console, his face pale with realization. "Captain, I've found something crucial. The station isn't just asking for authorization to use weapons. It's conducting some kind of test. What kind of test? The Keeper records describe a protocol for determining whether a species is worthy of inheriting their technology. The station is analyzing our responses to this crisis, measuring whether we understand and can uphold their prime directive. Sarah studied the tactical display showing the Dominion fleet. More ships continued to arrive, and she could see smaller vessels launching from the larger ones. Whatever the Dominion's goal, they were committing significant resources to this attack. What exactly is the prime directive, Doctor? Give me the full translation. Webb consulted his notes. Protect the innocent. Preserve life. Never harm those who cannot defend themselves. Use power only to shield the weak from the strong. Violence is permitted only when it serves to prevent greater violence. The philosophy was beautiful in its simplicity, but Sarah understood why it had led to the Keeper's destruction. In a galaxy full of predatory species, such idealism seemed impossible to maintain. Yet here was proof that it had worked for 50,000 years. Captain, Torres's voice carried new urgency. Those distant ships are moving closer. Our long-range sensors are identifying them as vessels from at least 8 different species. They're not Dominion. Sarah realized they were witnessing something unprecedented. Word of the Keeper Station's activation must have spread, and species from across the galaxy were converging on their location. Some were probably allies of the Dominion, but others might be descendants of those the Keepers had once protected. The station shuddered again, more violently this time. The shield barrier was showing visible cracks, lines of stress that pulsed with failing energy. Rodriguez was studying his instruments with growing alarm. Captain, shield integrity is down to 60%. At current rate of decay, we have maybe 20 minutes before total failure. Sarah made her decision. Doctor, can you communicate with the station? Tell it that we understand the prime directive and choose to honor it. Webb worked quickly at the interface, inputting commands based on his growing understanding of the Keeper language. The station's response was immediate and dramatic. New displays activated, showing detailed tactical information about every ship in the area. It's working, Webb said excitedly. The station is granting us access to its sensor networks. Captain, look at this. The tactical display showed not just the positions of all the ships, but detailed information about their crews and capabilities. The Dominion vessels were crewed by the Vorthok, the same species that had led the rebellion against the Keepers. But the other ships presented a more complex picture. Some of these vessels carried descendants of species the Keepers protected, Webb translated. They've been hiding in the outer rim for millennia, waiting for a sign that the Keepers might return. Sarah studied the display, seeing the strategic situation with new clarity. The Dominion had superior numbers and firepower, but they were facing not just the ancient Keeper Station, but potentially a coalition of every species they had oppressed for 50,000 years. Captain, I'm receiving a transmission, Torres reported. It's from one of the approaching ships. They're requesting permission to assist in defending the station. The irony wasn't lost on Sarah. The very scenario the Keepers had died to prevent, a galactic war between opposing factions, was about to unfold around their ancient station. But this time, there was a chance to do things differently. Can the station's weapons target specific systems rather than destroying entire ships? She asked Rodriguez. According to these readouts, absolutely. The Keeper weapons are incredibly precise. They could disable every Dominion ship without harming a single crew member. Sarah felt a plan forming. The Prime Directive didn't prohibit the use of force. It required that force be used responsibly, to protect rather than destroy. Doctor, can you access the station's communication systems? Within minutes, Webb had established contact with every ship in the area. Sarah's voice carried across space on frequencies that reached dozens of different species simultaneously. This is Captain Sarah Chen of the human vessel Prometheus, speaking on behalf of the Keeper Station. To all ships in this area, you are witnessing the reactivation of ancient technology that once maintained peace in this galaxy. The response was immediate. Dominion ships ceased fire, apparently stunned that the dead station was not only active, but occupied. The other vessels held their positions, waiting to see what would happen next. The Keepers established a simple principle, Sarah continued. Protect the innocent. Preserve life. Use power only to shield the weak from the strong. This station will honor that principle. She paused, allowing her words to be translated for the various species listening. Any ship that threatens innocent life will be disabled. Any ship that comes in peace will be welcomed. The choice is yours. The response from the Dominion Fleet Commander came quickly, transmitted on standard diplomatic frequencies. The voice was harsh, with the mechanical undertones typical of Vorthak communication technology. Human vessel, you do not understand what you have awakened. That station represents technology that belongs to the Dominion by right of conquest. Surrender now, and your deaths will be swift. Sarah looked at her small crew, a xenoarchaeologist, an engineer, and 2 security officers, standing in the control room of the most powerful weapons platform ever constructed. The responsibility was overwhelming, but the choice was clear. Doctor, target the Dominion ship's engines and weapon systems. Disable them, but don't destroy them. Webb's hands hesitated over the controls. Captain, are you certain? Once we use these weapons, there's no going back. We'll be committed to upholding the Keeper's legacy. Sarah thought about humanity's expansion into space, about the countless species that might benefit from the protection the Keepers had once provided. She thought about the Vorthak's threat and about the descendants of protected species who had spent 50 millennia hiding from Dominion oppression. Do it! The Keeper weapons fired with silent precision, beams of concentrated energy that struck each Dominion vessel exactly where intended. In seconds, 47 warships were reduced to helpless hulks drifting in space, their crews unharmed, but their capacity for violence eliminated. The other ships in the area responded with what could only be described as celebration. Transmissions poured in from dozens of species, many speaking languages that had been forbidden under Dominion rule. Dr. Webb worked frantically to translate the flood of communications. They're thanking us, he said, wonder in his voice. Some of these species haven't been able to speak freely in thousands of years. But Sarah knew their work was just beginning. The Dominion fleet was disabled, but it represented only a tiny fraction of their total military power. Word of this victory would spread quickly, and the response would be overwhelming. Captain, Rodriguez said quietly, the station is offering us something. It's transmitting technical specifications directly to our ship's computers. Sarah realized they were being given a choice that would define humanity's role in the galaxy. The Keeper's technology was being offered to them, along with the responsibility that came with it. Outside the viewing port, the first of the refugee ships was approaching for formal contact. After 50,000 years of hiding, the galaxy's oppressed were ready to emerge from the shadows, but the hardest challenges still lay ahead. 6 months had passed since the activation of the ancient station, and Captain Sarah Chen had learned that accepting the Keeper's legacy meant far more than operating powerful weapons. She stood in what had once been the Central Command Center, now bustling with representatives from 43 different species, all working together to rebuild the protection network that had been lost 50,000 years ago. The transformation had been remarkable. The refugee species, emerging from their hiding places throughout the outer rim, had brought with them technologies and knowledge that complemented the Keeper's ancient systems perfectly. What surprised Sarah most was how quickly they had adapted to working with humans, as if humanity's interpretation of the Prime Directive resonated with something they had been missing for millennia. Captain, we're receiving reports from the Centauri sector, announced Commander Takesh, a being whose species had been among the first to make contact after the Dominion defeat. Her people, the Zalari, had maintained Keeper historical records throughout their long exile, making them invaluable in understanding the ancient technology. "What's the situation there?" Sarah asked, reviewing the tactical displays that now showed protective coverage across 3-star systems. "The Vorthak are attempting to establish a new stronghold on Kepler 186F. Our intelligence suggests they're planning to use the civilian population as shields while they rebuild their fleet." Sarah felt the familiar weight of responsibility settle on her shoulders. The decision 6 months ago to accept the Keeper legacy had seemed straightforward in the heat of battle. But the reality of maintaining galactic peace was far more complex than she had imagined. Dr. Webb, now serving as the station's chief translator and cultural liaison, approached with a datapad full of intercepted communications. "We've been monitoring Dominion channels, and there's something you need to know. They're not just rebuilding their military capacity, they're spreading propaganda claiming that humans have violated galactic law by activating Keeper technology." "What's their argument?" "They're saying that since we're a newcomer species with no historical connection to the Keepers, we have no right to inherit their role. Some neutral species are starting to listen." Sarah nodded grimly. She had expected this challenge. The galaxy was vast and complex, with political relationships that had developed over millions of years. Humanity had been exploring space for less than 2 centuries, making them infants by galactic standards. "Any response from the Galactic Council?" Webb's expression grew more serious. "That's the problem. There hasn't been a unified Galactic Council since the Keeper's exile. The Dominion has been the closest thing to central authority, ruling through fear and military superiority. Our actions have created a power vacuum that dozens of species are trying to fill." Chief Rodriguez, who had spent months learning to operate Keeper technology, joined them at the central display. "Captain, I've been analyzing the old Keeper records, and I think I understand why they were so effective for so long. It wasn't just their technology, it was their approach to conflict resolution." He activated a holographic display showing historical records from the Keeper's era. They didn't just stop aggressor species militarily. They created economic and social incentives for peaceful behavior. Species that followed the Prime Directive gained access to advanced technology and trade networks. Those that didn't found themselves isolated. Sarah studied the records with growing understanding. They created a system where cooperation was more profitable than conquest. Exactly, but it took them centuries to establish that system, and they had the advantage of being the most advanced species in the galaxy when they started. The challenge seemed overwhelming. Humanity was trying to rebuild a peaceful galactic civilization while simultaneously learning to operate technology they barely understood, dealing with political complexities that spanned millennia, and facing active military opposition from the Dominion. "Captain," Takesh interrupted, "we're receiving an emergency signal from the Vega system. Dominion forces are attacking a medical convoy." Sarah felt her jaw tighten. Medical convoys were considered neutral under even the most basic rules of warfare. Attacking them was a clear violation of every civilized standard. "How far?" 18 hours at maximum hyperspace velocity. Sarah considered their options. The station's weapons could reach the Vega system, but only with their most powerful long-range projectors. It would be a clear demonstration of Keeper technology's reach, but it would also escalate the conflict significantly. "Ma'am," Rodriguez added quietly, "we also have 3 of our new allies' ships in that area, the Helix Confederation patrol vessel Starlight, the Zalari research ship Wisdom Seeker, and a Draconi exploration vessel called Sky Dancer." The situation was becoming more complex by the minute. If Sarah used the station's weapons to protect the medical convoy, she would be demonstrating humanity's commitment to the Prime Directive, but she would also be announcing to the galaxy that the new Keepers could strike anywhere, anytime. If she didn't act, innocent beings would die, and their allies would question humanity's resolve. "There's something else," Webb said, consulting his translation device. "We're receiving a communication from one of the ships under attack. They're specifically requesting keeper intervention. Sarah realized this was exactly the kind of moment that had defined the original keeper's legacy. 50,000 years ago, they had faced similar choices and had consistently chosen to protect the innocent, regardless of the political consequences. Target the Dominion ships attacking the convoy, disable their weapons and engines but preserve the crews. The station's ancient systems responded with flawless precision. Across 18 light-years of space, beams of directed energy struck the attacking vessels with surgical accuracy. Within seconds, the threat to the medical convoy was eliminated. The response was immediate and widespread. Communication channels across the galaxy lit up with reactions to the demonstration of keeper power. Some messages were supportive, praising the protection of innocent lives. Others were critical, condemning what they saw as human aggression. But the most important response came from an unexpected source. Takesh was monitoring deep space communications when she detected a transmission using keeper encryption protocols that hadn't been seen for 50,000 years. "Captain, you need to hear this." The transmission, when translated, was simple but profound. "The exile is ended. The keepers have returned. We seek permission to come home." Sarah felt her heart race. "Are you saying there are actual keepers still alive?" Webb was frantically cross-referencing the transmission with historical records. According to the archives, a small group of keepers chose exile rather than death when their civilization fell. They've been hiding in the space between galaxies, waiting for someone to reactivate their technology. The implications were staggering. If the original keepers were still alive and willing to return, humanity's role in the galaxy might change dramatically. But Sarah had learned enough about galactic politics to know that nothing was ever simple. How many of them? The transmission suggests approximately 300 individuals, along with their families and support staff. Maybe 800 beings total. Rodriguez was studying the technical implications. "Captain, if the original keepers return, do we step aside? Do we work together? What does this mean for everything we've built over the past 6 months?" Sarah looked around the command center at the dozens of species working together, many of whom had found hope for the first time in millennia because of humanity's intervention. She thought about the medical convoy that was now safe because humans had chosen to act. She considered the refugee communities that were finally able to emerge from hiding. "We asked them," she said simply. The response to their invitation was swift. The keeper ship that emerged from hyperspace 3 days later was unlike anything they had ever seen, sleek and graceful in a way that made even their advanced station look crude by comparison. It was also much smaller than expected, designed for exploration rather than conquest. The being who transported aboard the station was tall and ethereal, with features that suggested great age and wisdom. But what struck Sarah most was the expression of gratitude in eyes that had seen the rise and fall of galactic civilizations. "I am Keeper Aurelius," the being said in accented but clear English. "We have watched your actions from afar and are impressed by your understanding of our principles." "Will you be reclaiming the station?" Sarah asked directly. Aurelius smiled, an expression that somehow conveyed both sadness and hope. "Child, we are few and we are tired. We have spent 50,000 years in exile, watching the galaxy suffer without our protection. You have accomplished in 6 months what we thought might never happen again." He gestured to the bustling command center around them. "You have created something we never achieved. A truly cooperative galactic community. In our time, species followed our leadership out of respect for our power. You have inspired them to follow your leadership because they believe in your principles." Sarah felt the weight of his words. "What do you want us to do?" "Continue what you have begun. We will serve as advisors, as teachers, as partners. But the future of galactic civilization belongs to those who will live to see it flourish." Over the following weeks, As more original keepers returned and joined the growing alliance, Sarah began to understand that humanity had not inherited the keeper's role. They had evolved it into something new and better. The rigid hierarchy that had characterized the old keeper civilization had been replaced by a cooperative network where every species contributed according to their abilities and interests. The Dominion continued to resist, but their support was crumbling as more species chose cooperation over conquest. The galaxy was slowly but steadily moving toward the kind of peace that the original keepers had dreamed of but never quite achieved. Standing on the observation deck of the station, watching ships from dozens of worlds working together to deliver aid to a disaster-stricken planet, Sarah reflected on how much had changed since that first encounter with ancient technology. Humans had become the new keepers, not by inheriting power, but by proving they understood that true strength came from lifting others up rather than holding them down. The rule that had guided the original keepers, protect, don't hurt, had become more than a directive. It had become the foundation for a new kind of galactic civilization. The stars around them were no longer dark and dangerous territory to be conquered, but a vast community of worlds working together toward a brighter future. And at the heart of it all was the simple recognition that the greatest power in the universe was the power to protect rather than destroy.